Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Coming to you from sunny Florida down here, and today we're going to talk about desiccants. A little bit of difference between desiccants and dehumidification and drying. There's several ways of having dry air to dry a building. Uh, some areas of the country may just do it by opening the window or introducing outside air into a building. You normally have advantages and disadvantages, but you can't just open the windows and leave the building unsecure. We are all familiar with refrigerant dehumidifiers, low grain dehumidifiers, and other types of refrigerants. And today we're going to talk about desiccants and the advantages and disadvantages of desiccant dehumidification. I want to get a little more in depth about how desiccants work, how their temperature works, and the role that they can play in helping you to achieve your goal of getting a building dry in the most efficient and expedient manner that you need to do it in. So, uh, a desiccant's a tool in the toolbox. It does not work on every call. Uh, it does uh, have its role in a lot of drying situations. In most cases, it'll dry quicker than an LGR, but in some places LGRs work better. So it's a tool in the toolbox, and you have to figure out which tool that you want to use. A desiccant works by a silica gel, which absorbs the water in a desiccant well, and then you apply high heat to it, and the heat will absorb the water and blow it out into the atmosphere and blow your dry air back into the building. So that's the nuts and bolts on the short side of how it works. Um, the desiccants work well on large buildings. A lot of times you won't have enough power to run LGRs in a building. A hotel would be a good example. If you need 100 LGRs in it, you may very well overload the system, the electrical system in a hotel. When you add 700 amps to it, it's 7 amps for an LGR. So if you put 100 in there, you're adding 700 amps. There simply may not be that much power available. So then you get down to do you do power and distribution, or are you better to run a desiccant into the building and get dry air that way? So again, several ways to do it. Uh, you just have to figure out the advantages and disadvantages. Um, Water removal on a desiccant is about twice as much, give or take, than it would be on a refrigerant. Uh, it just makes the air a lot drier than a refrigerant can make it, uh, and gives you some advantages there if you're looking for speed in your drying. Um, Desiccants don't worry about dew point as much as refrigerants do. With refrigerants, uh, you've got to worry about temperature when you're running a refrigerant on the inside of the building, uh, and you got to worry about keeping the atmosphere a little bit warm with the refrigerant that you don't really have to do with the desiccant. Uh, Desiccants can put as much as 4% relative humidity out. I've seen them lower than that. Depends on the climate. But they can put out really dry air for you and help you achieve your dehumidification process a lot quicker than a refrigerant would, or any other type of dehumidification. Temperature impacts the refrigerant dehumidification pretty good. You've got to keep it, somewhere around 60, 70 degrees for a refrigerant to work. Uh, if you get a refrigerant too hot, it will not work at all. If you get it too cold, it will not work at all. With the Desiccant, it's going to work either way. Now, we all know that you still cannot dry very well with cold material, uh, whether it's drying the air or not. Uh, the material just will not put out the moisture that you want it to if it's not at least sort of warm. So, that going unsaid, you still need a little bit of heat going on for your drying. It really won't have anything to do with the dehumidification process. The Desiccant will do the dehumidification if it's warm or cold, either one. The biggest advantage with the Desiccant is if you don't have air conditioning and the temperatures are really high, so your refrigerants would not work at all, but your Desiccant still will work to be able to stabilize the atmosphere when you're trying to dry. We all know the importance of humidity control when we're doing drying projects. Um, you certainly don't want to reach dew point and cause it to quote unquote rain inside a building. It creates a lot of secondary damage and does not help the drying process whatsoever. It can damage materials and do a lot more uh, damage to the building even than it had from the initial water damage. So you've got to watch your dew points and your relative humidity and of course temperature helps with that. A Desiccant will achieve lower grains of moisture in the air, lower relative humidity if you're going off relative humidity than a refrigerant will, and will decrease the chance of reaching dew point that you would have in a building. A little bit about how desiccants work. You have desiccant material. It's most of the time a silica gel in a well. You have different chambers in a desiccant that uh, when the moist air comes in from the building, it attaches to the well, and when the well circulates, uh, it goes through three different chambers in the desiccant machine itself, and it circulates around. And when the high temperature, somewhere in the 200-degree range, hits the well, sort of like a big hair dryer, it removes the moisture from the well and blows it out into the atmosphere. And then as the well spins around, that air gets drier and drier that's in the next chamber over, and it'll put warm, dry air back into the building as it's taking the wet air out. So you've got the absorption of the moisture into the well, and then you exhale that out, discharging into the atmosphere, and then put the dry air back into the building. Little example of desiccants running here. The tubes run up to different floors of the building that would carry hot dry air back into the building, and then you can't see behind the machines, but you have a tube coming out of the building bringing the wet air in. Now, every now and then you will need to run what we call positive pressure on the building, where you will not have a tube coming out of the building pulling back in. And that's another tool in the toolbox that you'll use sometimes to be able to positively pressurize the building. That would come in handy if you got lots of people coming in and out of the building, and every time a door is open, you don't want to suck the wet air from outside into the building. You might run positive pressure. Uh, you may run positive pressure due to doing your air stabilization if you had microbial growth showing or in the building. So you might want to run positive pressure then. There could be several different sources where you'd want to use positive pressure, but you can run neutral pressure, positive pressure, or negative pressure, either one, with the Desiccant, again, allowing you to have a lot more flexibility on your drying project and what you're doing with it. These particular desiccants in the picture here are diesel fired desiccants. Diesel fired meaning that the heat source comes from a diesel burner in the unit. There are basically three different types of desiccants. You can have diesel fired, which has a heat source by diesel. You can have propane fired, which gives you the heater source of propane, or you can have all electric, which gives you the heat source from electric heat banks. Obviously, the electric carries a lot more electrical demands than the propane or the diesel would, so it requires a much larger generator to be able to run an electric desiccant. They do have their advantages in the fact if you only have one fuel source to fuel, and that would be the generator itself. On occasion, you can hook them into building power with a commercial electrician if they have three-phase power available. All of your electric desiccants of any size will run on three-phase electricity to be able to have enough electricity to run the power banks on. Lots of CFM, lots of airflow going in to a desiccant. The medium sized ones start at 5,000 CFM. It's cubic feet per minute. If you want to gauge that by an LGR, most LGRs are going to put out like 200 CFM per minute. So one desiccant will equal what a whole lot of refrigerant dehumidifiers would do. Um, of course, exchanging the air for wet air to dry air is the importance of dehumidification and the importance of drying. So that's another advantage to desiccants. Desiccants by far is a better drying machine than LGRs, but not always practical because LGRs are very important in a lot of different situations and scenarios. Again, you can run your desiccants in two or three different phases. Most of the time, they run on neutral pressure, where you bring in air out of a building. You are bringing the wet air out of the building. You're running it through the desiccant and drying the air and putting it back into the building. Is most of the time your most desirable setup. However, when you need positive pressure in the building, then you have the flexibility of being able to move your tubes around and do different things that can make the desiccant on neutral pressure or positive pressure or even negative pressure. So it's all about the airflow when you get into a building. You see the plastic tubing running through the hotel here. Uh, and that plastic tubing would be dry air coming back into the building. And you can use that plastic tubing as a temporary ductwork to run that dry air anywhere through the building that you need to run it. So you're not dumping all the dry air into one spot where the desiccant's sitting. You're distributing it equally through the building. If you're running negative, neutral pressure or negative pressure, either one, then you'll also have a tube that is drawing the air back out of the building, so you get the air a little drier each time it recirculates and goes through. Um, we're always here to help you. We're on standby. Um, Anytime you need some help, we've got a good crew available. Can come out and help you. As you notice in the picture, no logos on our uniforms. So if you need help and need us to come out and give you some advice on a project or maybe bring equipment or do something, we'll be glad to help you out with that. So uh, if you have any other questions about desiccants, feel free to give me a call. I'll be glad to answer your questions. My phone number is on the screen there. and we will be glad to come out and help you with that. So, enjoyed talking to you this morning. If you have any comments, give me a call. Thank you.